Hey everybody, this thing right here is, well, it's a tiny electric compressor is what it is. And it's meant to replace your typical CO2 inflators like these, or even your mini pumps like these. In this video, we'll be putting the Cycplus cube to the test and attempting to answer the question of whether or not it's worth it to pick one up for yourself. Now for starters, the Cycplus cube is marketed as a tiny e-pump. There's a 7.4 volt rechargeable battery that has a capacity of 300 milliamp hours, and it charges via an included USB-C cable. It's capable of inflating Schrader and Presta valves, but you do have to swap out this little included bit on the inflator, and it charges up in about 20 minutes. It claims to be able to inflate a 700C by 25 millimeter tire from flat to 80 psi in about 80 seconds, twice on a single charge. There's only one button on it, which also serves as an indicating light, and it'll tell you how much battery life is left. It also comes with this little silicone case, which is meant to sort of protect from scratches, but it's also meant as a thermal barrier because it does get kind of warm when you use it. Now the Cycplus cube does claim to be able to inflate a road tire 2 times, so I think it's only fair to compare the weight against 2 CO2 cartridges, and these weigh in at 214.8 grams. And then on the other side, of course, you have your typical portable pump, like this 1UP EDC pump, which weighs in at 153.8 grams. And then you can also go extremely minimalist, like this Blackburn tiny pump that I've had forever, and this comes in at a measly 61.5 grams. So where does the Cycplus cube fall in terms of weight? 96 grams on the dot. Actually pretty substantially lighter than a pair of CO2 cartridges or a typical sized portable pump. So really small and relatively light, but of course it all comes down to functionality. Can it actually inflate tires, and are there any quirks that we should be aware of? Okay, so what I have here is a wheel off the Polygon Helios 700C by 28 tire. Okay, so it's not going to be super scientific, but I do have my stopwatch going on my phone here, and I've got my digital toe peak gauge here. So the way this thing works is you push the button once, which gives you the battery level currently, and then you push the button again to start inflating. Let's do a little check here. Minute 20 to 55 psi. It doesn't go every time. It kind of starts sometimes, but it won't keep going. I wonder if that's an overheating issue. Oh, 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I'm going to call this experiment. Officially, in 2 minutes and 50 seconds, we got up to about 60 psi, and the battery's down to red. I'm not convinced that we can do that all over again and get a second tire up to 60 psi, but I suppose we can try. We are fading fast. We're out of battery. Okay, so we ran out of battery in 30 seconds. We got a second tire up to 21 psi. Interesting. So the numbers don't lie. For road tires, I'm not sure that this is going to be your best option. Although for a mountain bike tire, you do have to contend with much less pressure, but there's a much larger volume. All right, so it's been about 20 minutes. We have a green, fully charged LED indicator. So this is a Terravale Honcho 29 by 2.6. And even though I only run this tire at about 18 psi, there's just a lot of air in here. It's pretty flat, I'd say. Let's see how fast we can get this tire up to, just call it 20 psi. All right, so that's a minute and a half. 21 psi. So kind of as suspected, it's not the volume that's the issue, it's those higher pressures. And this thing actually did fine on the mountain bike tire. I kind of want to see how long it takes to pump up this tire using a more traditional approach. All right, so got all the air out again. This is all for science. Start the timer. Dropping tools. Getting tired. All right, so that was a minute 30. 8 psi. Holy shit. All right, so with the mini pump, I was able to get to 8 psi, and I'm tired. Plus, it never looks particularly appropriate to use a mini pump. So now obviously something like this represents a more practical mini pump. Still a lot of effort, but it's definitely pumping up a lot faster. Okay. Oh yeah, 21 psi. Okay, so in an additional minute, we went from 8 psi to 20 psi using the 1UP EDC, which is definitely a lot faster. I guess the last thing to test is to see how many times we can inflate a mountain bike tire like this on a single charge. All right, so minute 30, 19 PSI. So got 2 full inflations out of it. I guess that means we have to try it again, huh? You can hear it starting to fade a little bit. Nope, and that's all we got. Okay, so third inflation got us to 19 PSI in a minute and 40. We got 3 inflations out of it on a big tire. Not too bad. Okay, so what did we learn? Is the Cycplus Cube going to replace your mini pump or your CO2 cartridges in all circumstances? Probably not. When it came to the road tire, this thing really struggles to get up to pressure. I think we maxed out at around 60 or 65 PSI on that 700C by 28 tire. So I just don't see this thing reliably getting you up to 100 PSI on a skinny road tire. However, on the mountain bike side, I was actually pretty impressed. This thing inflated a really big 29 by 2.6 inch mountain bike tire from flat up to about 20 PSI 3 times on the same charge. And it did it in about 90 seconds, which as we saw, I couldn't even beat with a traditional mini pump like this. Now, obviously one thing that I didn't mention earlier is that this thing is really loud. I mean, it is a compressor after all. Now, if you're somebody who likes to pump up your tires discreetly for some reason, that could be a concern. But out in the open, it's not gonna draw any unnecessary attention. Now, we only really tested the extreme ends of the spectrum, skinny road tire on one end of the spectrum, large volume mountain bike tire on the other. Now, if you're thinking about using something like this for a gravel bike, for instance, like a 700C by 38 to 40 or 45 millimeter tire, this thing would actually do great because typically you're not gonna be running those types of tires anywhere in excess of 30 to maybe 40 PSI at the most. So basically my takeaway is that as long as you're not trying to pump up a skinny road bike tire to anything more than 65 PSI, this thing is actually a really good option. It's small enough that you can put into a pocket or a hip pack or basically anywhere else that you would typically store a mini pump. Now in May of 2023, this Cycplus Cube mini pump retails for $89 US, and for the time being, it's only available on their website, which there's a link to down in the description. All right, well, that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. A little bit of pseudoscience. I don't review everything that comes my way, but once in a while, there's a product that's pretty interesting and I wanna check it out. If you have any questions about this product, just let us know down in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Thanks again for watching and thanks again for subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.